and have your camera off. Questions should be entered into the chat box in the lower right-hand corner. Questions will be addressed at the conclusion of the presentation, and the presentation will be provided via email to all registered participants. Next slide, please. So with that, I'm going to introduce Cheryl Moon Sirianni, PennDOT District 11 District Executive, and she's going to introduce some others, the experts that we've pulled together for this workshop. Cheryl?
Thanks, Dom. For those of you that don't know me, I kind of saw a few familiar names on the list here, but I wanted to thank you for tuning in today. We have some really good information to share, and I'll get to that in a second. I just want to introduce our team. We have a lot of very knowledgeable folks that have put together this presentation to help you out, to answer questions, to give you some information on how to move forward with working on, replacing, managing the bridges that you may own. So with that, I'm going to introduce the PennDOT staff we have on the line. We have Doug Seeley. They're going to wave hello. They're on camera when we say their name. So Doug Seeley is our Assistant District Executive for Design. Many of you know Doug. Shane Zelenkowicz is our District 11 Bridge Engineer. He took the place of Lou Ruzzi, which a lot of you may have worked for in the past, about a year and a half ago. Keith Dougal is in charge of our local bridge program, our bridge inspections. Yes, many of you may deal with Keith. Keith Cornelius is actually his supervisor. He's assistant bridge engineer who has worked in the bridge unit for quite some time and is familiar with a lot of the issues that have come about over the years. Dina Salemi is our design services engineer, and she's extremely familiar about local projects, contract and consultant agreement development. I'll be able to answer any of your questions there. And John Quatman is our District 11 Planning and Programming Manager. He took the place of Rob Muskanek, who many of you may have dealt with over the years, and John's very knowledgeable about the inner workings of the planning and programming unit. Dom, do you want to introduce your staff?
Yes, Cheryl. I'll introduce Ryan Gordon. Ryan is our Transportation Program Development Manager. Ryan is the guy who leads us in the development of our TIP work group meetings and really putting together our transportation improvement plan, which is a 4-year plan that's visited every 2 years. And then also John Weber, who also works on those same things. He's our program development planner. Next slide. So Cheryl, I don't know if you want to talk about this.
So none of us are very proud. Is that coming in too loud, Doug? Oh, okay. None of us were very proud of what happened with Fern Hollow, but I think there's some good that's going to come from that. Right after the bridge collapse, we received a lot of requests from legislators, from communities, from municipalities asking, is the bridge I drive over safe? Well, how can my bridge be replaced? A lot of questions about, I think my bridge needs replaced now. I don't want this to happen in my area. How can I get funding for it? So we thought rather than individually send out a bunch of letters, we'd have this combined workshop with SPC and try to explain to you how PennDOT manages our bridges and how we can help you, us and SPC collaboratively help you manage your existing assets, and then what you can do when there is a need to do some repairs or replacements to your bridge assets. So what we're going to go through here, we have these really smart people on the line that are way smarter than me that are going to go through all these steps, give you a little explanation, and then of course we'll have opportunities to
No, I'm in a webinar. I don't know why.
Somebody not muted. All right, somebody just muted me. Okay, so anyhow, we're going to explain what our bridge unit, how our bridge unit operates, how we can help you. SPC is going to explain their role and how projects get funded, what projects are actually available for federal type funding, state funding. There's a whole different funding sources that we'll get into. And then obviously the last one, it always becomes a bit of an issue, is project administration and local assistance for the municipalities. And of course, as I said, We'll have a definitely opportunity for question and answers at the end. And if you don't think about the question at the time or don't want to ask it in front of everybody, you know, we have the question and answer box going, and then we'll always be available to answer any emails that you may want to send in. So like we said here, we want to explain how bridge inspections work. You know, you've heard a whole lot about bridge inspections lately. How do they work? How often do you need them? Who performs them? What qualifications do you need? And then once you do the inspection, you might need a little bit of maintenance. You might, you know, what is bridge maintenance? What are things that you can do with your staff, you know, contractually? And what exactly does a priority 0, 1, all of those things mean when we hand you a bridge inspection report and it says you have a priority 0 and you have to fix it? What's that mean? So Shane and his staff are going to talk about that. We're going to explain to you how we handle our assets. We have a lot. We have over 1,800 in our district of bridges, and how do we keep them all safe for the traveling public? It's not easy. It's very costly, but we're going to give you some ideas on what we do and how we kind of spread some of the work around to various contracts and in-house forces. Dom and his staff are going to explain SPC's role and how bridges get programmed on the tip. And then we're also going to explain to you about a bit different funding sources, whether it's tip funding sources or other type of funding sources that may be available. And then we will explain to you that we're not sitting here with a huge pot of money for everybody. We do have to watch our dollars collectively. We have a region of a lot of needs. We have a lot of bridges, and we have to make sure we're expending them and getting a lot of value, a lot of cost benefit from every dollar that we spend. And then Dina's probably going to go into the most of this last bullet. And what happens a lot is people come to SPC, come to the department, say, I need a bridge and I need to get it fixed, or I need to get it replaced. And you may have excellent local engineers that are fantastic with water and sewer, but maybe not bridge replacements, and they don't really know how to navigate the project development process. Or you might have great engineers that are really good with maybe bridge design, but just maybe don't know all the steps that you need to go to get projects from here's our problem and here's how you get it out to bid and under construction. So there's some very specific rules. Dina knows them probably better than anybody, and she's going to go through those for you. It's very important. Not this last bullet isn't really just important for bridge delivery. It's anytime you want to use any type of federal or state funds, it's really important to go through, know what these steps are, and know they don't happen overnight, and there's a process. So with that being said, I think Shane Lankwitz is going to start off and explain to you how the PennDOT Bridge Unit works.
Thanks, Cheryl. Next slide. Well, as Cheryl said, I'm Shane Lankwitz. I'm the district bridge engineer for District 11. Like she mentioned, we do have Keith Cornelius on the line. He's our assistant bridge engineer, and Keith Dougal handles a lot of the local stuff for us. So Keith, if you have anything to add, feel free to jump in and add to the presentation here. But we're just going to start out with our bridge inspection program. So which bridges require inspection? So any bridge that's 20 feet or greater requires an inspection. That's a federal requirement. And they're inspected every 24 months in general. Most bridges are that way. So if your bridge has more deterioration in it, we might have to reduce that frequency to say like 12 months or 6 months, but that would be based on its condition. Now, who performs those inspections? Well, there's two different ways to do it, but in general, these bridge inspections are performed by certified bridge inspectors. They're qualified people from consultants firms that inspect the local system. So PennDOT, we maintain consultant agreements for the consultants to use, and the municipalities also have the option to enter into their own agreements with their own qualified inspection firms outside of our agreements. Next. More on the bridge inspection program. So who pays for these inspections? So again, PennDOT, we select consultants for these agreements. that the locals have access to. With those agreements, it's 80% federal funds and a 20% local match. The 20% local match is deducted from the liquid fuels funds. So there's really no out-of-pocket payments required from the municipality. It's a pretty seamless process, and it's something that we recommend. And if someone would ask us whether to use our consultant agreements or get your own, we feel it's best to utilize ours. Like I said, we select those consultants through consultant selection process, and we have good faith in those inspection firms. Now, the other option is a reimbursement agreement. So if you decide you want to hire your own inspector, it's a little bit different process. So that municipality will get that consultant on board, and they will pay 100% of the costs. Then, the municipality has to request for reimbursement to PennDOT. And we process those invoices in ECMS, and then the municipality is reimbursed 80% of the cost. So it's a little bit more of a process if you choose to go that route. Next. So that's just a little bit briefly there on some inspections, but just wanted to talk a little bit about analysis. So how are we going to determine, what loads or what vehicles are safe for our bridges? Load rating analyses are done right out of the gate. So if you design a new bridge, there's analysis done so we know the capacity of that bridge. And those analyses are updated throughout the life of the bridge. And they're updated anytime, if you have a project and you replace the bridge deck, for example, or, add pavement on top of that bridge deck, well, you're changing the weight of that bridge. You're changing things to that bridge. So an analysis needs to be updated to get the revised capacity so we know that capacity of that structure. Now, the other time that we would update an analysis is, our inspectors are going to be out there. They're going to be looking for deterioration, maybe section loss in steel, that those steel beams are starting to see some rust and the steel is getting thinner. They're going to look for all those areas on the structure and see any deterioration. And if, any of those load carrying members are affected, that's going to warrant an updated analysis. And we really don't have a strict rule for how often we update these analyses. Now, again, if there's deterioration, we're going to update that right away. But say you have a brand new bridge and it's in good shape, that analysis, holds water for, a long amount of time. So it's whenever that bridge starts to get older and sees a little bit more deterioration. If we notice that analysis hasn't been updated within 7 years, that's our rule of thumb. And I think our central office is trying to provide more guidance on when to update those analyses. But as I mentioned, those consultant agreements that we use, those are typically about 5-year agreements, I believe. And, sometimes we change consultants. So a lot of times we like the new consultant to update the analysis as well. Next. So moving on to some priority maintenance repairs. So our inspectors are out there and they're, like we said, we're going to note all that deterioration in the structure, and they're going to come across some important things that they see. And those are priority maintenance repairs. And those are priority 0s through 5s, with 0s and 1s being the most important. So if an inspector notices a priority 0, that repair needs to be completed within 7 days. It's time sensitive, just like a priority 1, not as critical as a priority 0, but it is a high priority, and it needs to be completed within 6 months. Now, there are 2s through 5s. Those are important, not as critical as 0s and 1s. But it's good to know what those priorities are. It's good to know what the inspectors are finding, and helps you have an idea of what's going on with your assets. Next. So how is a local going to find out about these priority maintenance items? So, if an inspector is out there and notices a priority 0, that inspector is going to notify you the same day, usually while on site. And they do follow up with a letter to confirm. Same thing with a priority 1. Those inspectors are going to send out a letter notifying the municipality. Sometimes it's the same day, usually by the next day. Because a priority 1, you have 6 months versus a 0 where you have 7 days to mitigate that. Priority 2s through 5s, again, aren't time sensitive like 0s and 1s. And they're included in the inspection report, so you can find those there. Next. Wanted to go through some examples of what a 0 and 1 repair is. So here's a priority 0. You can see right through that beam there. Severely deteriorated steel member. Now, if an inspector sees something like that, they're probably going to want to close that bridge right away. They might close it right there, down there, and that's an immediate action. Next. Here's another example, a severely undermined bearing. This is looking from down below. You can see that concrete is spalled and that masonry plate is hanging over the substructure. Now in this situation, that is carrying a sidewalk. That beam is carrying a sidewalk. So there's no vehicular traffic in this instance. So the required action would be to close the sidewalk or repair the concrete. Now, it's probably going to be a two-pronged approach in a situation like this because sometimes it's just not easy to get a repair designed. A contractor out there within 7 days. So you might close the sidewalk while you're working on the repair design and getting a contractor on board. Once you get them on board, you get it repaired, and then you can reopen that sidewalk. Next. This one is pretty critical here. So as you can see in the picture here on the left, there's a weight limit restriction on this bridge. If an inspector's out there and they know this bridge is supposed to be posted and they notice the signs are missing, that is a priority 0. And those signs need to be replaced as soon as possible within 7 days. Next. Here's a priority 1 example, a cracked truss member. It's not, load carrying capacity is not affected. So the required action is just to repair that steel member, and the time frame is 6 months. Next. Here's a good example of a priority 1. This one's really important. This is a leaking deck joint. So you can see this joint is compromised, and anytime you have water leaking through the bridge deck onto the beams, onto the bearings, onto the substructure, it's going to cause that deterioration to be rapid. It's going to accelerate that deterioration underneath. And that's one way to keep your bridge in good condition, is to make sure these bridge deck joints are sealed. So when our inspectors see a leaking joint, it's priority 1, and you want to get that repaired within 6 months. Next. Another example is here's a sidewalk here with a tripping hazard. It's another priority 1. It has to be repaired within 6 months. Next. So we talked a little bit about, inspection frequencies and, analysis and some priority maintenance. So all this work is going to generate a report, and we're going to have an inspection report on each of our bridges. Now, once those bridges are inspected and those reports are accepted, those inspection firms are required to provide you with a copy of that report. Now, another way to do it is to access that information directly into our bridge management system. You can see the website there. If you don't have access, you can call the PennDOT IT service desk, and you can gain access for the bridges that you own. And how do you know which structures you do own? Now, most of you do know which bridges are yours, which assets you own. But if you ever have a question about any of that, we can easily run reports that would list all the structures that you own, the condition of them, the span lengths, the deck area, things like that in this snapshot report. Now, part of this report would list the bridge key. Like every bridge has a bridge key. It's kind of like your social security number. Every bridge has that number. So you need that bridge key number. So when you go into BMS, you type the bridge key number in, and all your information on that structure will be in there. It's a huge database. You can store we like to store our existing plans there. A lot of times the local existing plans are there. Anytime you do a project with, any sort of rehab or preservation, those plans are in there. You can even have right-of-way plans in there. Just information about that structure, any repairs that have been made are in that system. Next. So a little bit about asset management. So the philosophy here is, you have lowest life cycle cost versus a worst first strategy. So with us, we really like to look at things at a lowest life cycle cost, and everybody wants to get the longest life out of their structures. I mean, if you build a new bridge today, I would like to see 100 years out of that bridge. So if you built a new bridge today and you did no maintenance to it, you're not going to get that 100-year life. Same thing like if you were going to buy a new truck off the lot, like a brand new F-150, if you choose not to change the oil, what's going to happen? That engine's not going to last very long. So over the life of that vehicle or over the life of this bridge, you have to do required maintenance to your assets to get the longest life. So that means making sure the joints are sealed, making sure the concrete is sealed. Same thing if you had a concrete driveway in your house. If you don't seal it, it might start spalling before you would want it to. So we want to perform some routine maintenance, usually on a 20-year cycle. We like to do that on our bridges. So the worst first strategy is just the way it sounds. So if you look at all the bridges that you own and you only work on the worst bridges that you have and replace the worst bridges, you're neglecting the bridges that are in good condition. And you want to keep your good bridges good and in good working order, because if you don't, again, you just won't get the longest life out of them. And for us, how we maintain these things, we have our inspection program with state-owned bridges, just like you guys do with the local bridge inspections. And, we try to set up consultant agreements, or we have in-house folks. We're fortunate we do have a larger staff, and I understand the locals may not have access to staff like that, but it's nice to have access to designers. So if you do get a priority 0 or 1, you can get something designed, so something can be repaired, access to contractors. We have on-demand contractors. But if you ever have any questions about strategies or anything like that, you can always feel free to reach out to me or Keith Dougal. My contact information is there, my number and my email address. Again, we can give you a snapshot of all the assets that you own. Make sure you have access to BMS2, and that will give you a lot of information about your structures so you can start looking at them from a lowest life cycle cost perspective. And we also use those asset management tools, Bridge Care, which we call BAMS, and again, BMS2 that houses all the information. So Keith, I don't know if you wanted to add anything there. That was a lot of information really quickly. And I guess we can take questions at the end.
All right, not hearing anything, we're going to move on. I'm going to talk a little bit about the SPC. Next slide. So the SPC serves as the official MPO, Metropolitan Planning Organization, for the 10-county region in southwestern PA. SPC is responsible for the region's transportation planning process that supports the effective operations, maintenance, and improvement of the regional transportation system. We act as the forum, for identifying needs, proposing solutions, and really gaining agreement amongst the entire region on where and how the federal transportation dollars are spent within the planning area. Our board is comprised of county commissioners and their appointments, PennDOT, transit authorities, and local, state, and federal agencies. Our area covers 10 counties, over 7,000 square miles, 548 municipalities, 3 PennDOT districts, 10 transit agencies, and what we probably should have added there, I believe, is over 6,600 bridges. Next slide. What does SPC do? Well, we do a lot more than transportation. Some of the other things we do, we are the Center for Regional Collaboration and Cooperation. We coordinate the regional transportation planning efforts. We work on a regional long-range transportation plan, and as I mentioned before, and we'll get into some more detail with Ryan Gordon from our staff, the Transportation Improvement Program. We provide technical assistance. We have a regional data center where you could seek all kinds of data available with regard to our region. We have a commuter info van pool program. We have a water resource center. We have a small business assistance program that deals with loans and assists with procurement, at small business loans. And we also do economic development coordination. Next slide. And who is involved in the process? Everybody. The public, municipalities, freight, ped bike, multimodal stakeholders, transportation management associations, city and county planning agencies, PennDOT and other state agencies, regional transit providers, elected and appointed officials, Federal Highway Administration, and other federal agencies like the Federal Transit Administration as well. Next slide. I'm going to introduce Ryan Gordon of our staff, who's going to get into the meat and potatoes of the Transportation Improvement Program and explain to you how local bridges are involved within that program. Ryan?
Thanks, Dom. Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
All right, so in this next section, as Dom said, we want to provide everyone with a review of some of the funding that's used for local bridge projects. And funding can be broken down into two main areas: funding through the TIP and funding that's not through the TIP or non-TIP funding. So local bridges can tap into either one of those areas. First, I'm going to cover the TIP funding, because that's what SPC's Program Development Group and myself and Dom work on, along with a huge team at District 11, as well as representatives from the counties, which we'll get into detail on here. I work most closely with the District Planning and Programming Unit. So that's John Quatman, and John's on the call. So John, feel free to tag in on any of these slides if you think of something you want to say. And at the end, I'll see if you have any final thoughts.
Will do, Ryan.
So the TIP is really short for the Transportation Improvement Program. It's required to be developed every 2 years for the SPC region. It identifies all the transportation investments over a 4-year period. There are really two sides to the TIP. There's the transit side, which we have a whole separate staff that works on. It works closely with Port Authority and other transit agencies. And then there's what we call the highway bridge side. That's what myself and our staff and John work on. So we'll be discussing that here in the next few slides. The highway bridge TIP really includes investments across the networks. It does include, obviously bridges, roadways, but it also includes safety projects, bicycle and pedestrian facility projects. It includes some public transportation or transit projects. And there's just a lot of different related, programs and projects on the TIP. So when we're talking about SPC, there's 3 PennDOT districts, and we work closely with each one of these districts, as well as a vast array of planning professionals in each of our counties and the city of Pittsburgh, in what we call the TIP development work groups. And these work groups for the entire region, we're represented by over 90 professionals that are in the transportation sector. So in that role, SPC is really the facilitator of this process, and it focuses in on collaboration and consensus to develop the TIP in each of our 3 districts. Then we merge them together for the whole region. So as a federal requirement, and this is the most important thing, is the TIP is fiscally constrained. It's not a wish list of everything we want to do, everything we need to do. It is strictly adhering to the amount of funds and federal and state funds that we have to work with. We're only putting projects on here, and we cannot exceed those constraints. Another point would be that local entities are encouraged to monitor the projects in your municipalities because they're going to have opportunity for collaboration, particularly in what we call the PennDOT Connects process, where we really work with PennDOT and striving to get that municipal input on upcoming projects.
Quick question, Jill, 6th Street last September.
Excuse me?
If we were advertising anything for contracts, that would have been construction related, correct?
Yeah,
Okay, that's what I thought.
Right.
Thank you.
thanks.
All right, bye.
Bye.
All right. Okay, I'm going to keep going here. As I mentioned, SPC is the facilitator of the TIP work groups and the TIP development process. And in this process, we continually strive for collaboration. Here's a few key, tasks that we do in the TIP work groups throughout the development of the draft TIP. When we're developing the draft TIP, we must first look at what we call carryover projects. And these are the projects that have been started previously in previous years and in previous TIPs or the current TIP. We must continue to fund those projects through to construction. We're not really allowed to start projects and then not complete them. So that is our really one of our main driving factors. The other thing that we use the work group for is really reviewing statuses of all of our comments that come in, as well as our candidate projects that we have. And we also work a lot in looking at different iterations of the working TIP as we all agree on what needs to be programmed. So, for example, just to develop the 2023 TIP, in just District 11, we had 8 work group meetings. So you push it out to the whole region, and we had something like 23 to 24 meetings. So when it comes to thinking about candidate projects for the TIP, there's really 3 main avenues for those projects to be submitted for consideration in the TIP work groups. And that's really public comment through your county and through the PennDOT district. So first off, public comment. This is largely derived from what we call the State Transportation Commission's pre-TIP comment period. And that usually is our kickoff to the entire TIP update. It usually occurs around 15 months ahead of the TIP adoption. We do that comment period in conjunction with, like I said, the State Transportation Commission. And this yields a lot of comments. I think for the 2023 TIP, we had somewhere in the neighborhood of 600, 650 comments that came through the pre-TIP process. We also run a formal comment period, and this is typically a lot closer to adoption, about a month out. In fact, right now we're in the SPC comment period for the 2023 draft. It's currently open. And the TIP work group we gather all the comments from these 2 sources, and we present them and we review them at TIP work group meetings, and we look at all of them in consideration for potential projects or things we need to route to different parts of the PennDOT or ourselves or counties. The second option for identifying and submitting your candidate projects is really through your county and your county planning office, and this is pretty much the key straightforward. You're wanting to submit your candidates and your needs to your county. Each of our county planning representatives in the TIP work group will develop their own candidate lists, including by priority. So you want to get on your county's radar in terms of if it's a project of need in your municipality. And then the third way that projects typically come onto the radar is just, through, some of the work that the bridge unit does and their awareness of people that contact them. And we have that across the board with our, PennDOT staff at District 11, through the, bridge unit, highway unit, safety units, all of those entities. They continually look at candidate projects and they continually update and present those and talk about them, both internally and with the TIP work group. So I've mentioned it a couple of times. Here's really an overview of the TIP work group in terms of folks in District 11. There's a lot of experience here from, like I said, various units at District 11, from the design unit to planning and programming, of course, the bridge folks that you already heard from, highway unit, the traffic units. Also, we have key planners and folks in public works throughout the counties and within the city of Pittsburgh. So, and then of course our staff that kind of facilitates and runs it all, led by Dominic. And so it's just a really good group that works in a very collaborative, consensus building way in a professional manner. So, so I did want to provide a little bit of background in terms of funding. This graph really depicts our TIP revenues over the past several TIPs. You can see here we've been on a downward trajectory since about the 2015 TIP. The passage of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act in November really helped out the 2023 TIP tremendously. And you can see that in that last bar graph. This is on the highway bridge side in blue there. And that light blue rectangle, if we had not had that passage of the bipartisan infrastructure bill, we would be down at that level at the darker blue. So we would be dipping really low. Now with IIJA, when the federal fund increase, we're back up to about where we were in the 2019 TIP. The investment overall, like I mentioned, it's in a bunch of different areas. You can see the investment breakdown here of the 2023 draft TIP. So as you can see here, the region has a very strong commitment to investing in bridges, replacement, and preservation of the existing bridge assets. It's the largest piece of the pie when you're talking about what are we investing in the region. You can see some of the other investment categories that we also invest in. So obviously there's a lot of needs in the region, in all capacities, in all areas, but particularly in bridge needs. The needs of the region really do exceed our anticipated TIP funding. And this chart kind of brings it home. We're looking at here the years, maybe 5 to 12 years out here. You can see that the IIJA provided a lot of federal funds that infused funding into the needs, but as we're looking further out, we're still seeing significant funding gaps. So you gotta keep that in back of your mind. We don't have funding to do everything that's needed. So reiterating what I said at the start, there's funding on the local side for local bridges, can be either TIP funds or non-TIP funds. So first I'm going to run through some fund types that we deal with on the TIP. And I'll say this, I'm going to go through this rapidly, but all the information that I'm going to touch on here is detailed in SPC's local bridge funding guide. It's on our website. I'll be providing a link to this here at the very end of the presentation. We have a resources slide. That link is in there. So on the tip side, there's some federal and state funds that you can use on bridges that are owned by local entities. I'm going to go over a couple of those, but the key to all this is the last bullet. If your local bridges are funded with federal and state tip funds, they must adhere to all federal regulations pertaining to the planning, programming, and project development of those bridges. And on the back end of that, on the project development, when I'm done here, I'm going to turn it over to Dina, and she's going to go into just a basic overview of just some of these requirements. It's important to know if you're getting these funds from the tip, you're going to have to do all of the requirements necessary. It's going to take longer, and it's probably going to cost more than you might realize. All right, I'm going to just rapid fire these. These are, like I said, all in our bridge funding guidance. This is the new fund program that was created for federal bridge investment. This came out of the Bipartisan Infrastructure and Jobs Act, and it's really a new pot of federal funds for bridges. You can use this on off-system bridges, which are basically local bridges, and some off-system PennDOT bridges. This is Surface Transportation Block Grant funds, or what we call STP. For these, if it's a locally owned structure, it would have to be on the federal aid system. And so that narrows it down to some of the bigger bridges that are owned by Allegheny County or perhaps the city. And then the third one here that I'm going to hit on is these are federal funds as well. This is what we call off-system bridge funds. This is really our most common tip funds that we would use on local projects. Just because it's federal funds is designed to be on bridges that are off of the federal aid system. In many cases, there's a 20% match, and a lot of times we can use the next fund type to get that 15% state. And that would be what we call appropriation 183 funds. This is really when we're trying to put state funds onto a local bridge. We don't have a ton of these funds, but we try to use them strategically in providing that 10 to 15% state funds on the local project. So now I'm going to shift over to the non-tip funds. This is the same diagram, like saying, you know, we've got tip funds and non-tip. I'm going to talk about the non-tip. So it's additional. It doesn't come through the tip, and there are multiple funding sources that are distributing statewide to counties, to municipalities, and to PennDOT maintenance, or they can come in the shape of competitive grant programs. Now, I've listed a few of them here, and like I said, it's really due to the demand on our tip funds. You saw those charts and you saw the amount of money. Due to the demand that we have on our tip funds, the other state and local bridge fund options that are available, you're going to really want to look into those. Here's a listing of some of those programs. Like I said, for a complete description of all these, you're going to want to see our local funding guide. I'm only going to hit on the top three here briefly today. This is the most common and most predominant. This is called municipal liquid fuels allocations. I think everyone would be familiar with these. This is the predominant state funding for local infrastructure. Typically, it's dispersed directly to municipalities and also directly to counties. I think everyone knows this fund type. It's got a very, very flexible funds for almost any local asset and infrastructure projects, and it's obviously available for use on local bridge maintenance and local bridge projects. The next one is called the multimodal funds, and there's really this kind of I'm focusing here on the PennDOT multimodal funds, which is mostly what we deal with. There is the economic development side of the state that also has something called multimodal as well. So I think we've got both in our funding guide, but mostly we're talking about transportation. We're talking about the PennDOT multimodal fund here. And it's really, available for a wide range of transportation infrastructure projects. And we've done, several local bridges have been successful in obtaining this funding. It was just announced for 2023. It's typically come out in the late summer, early fall. And we'd be able to direct you to how to apply for that. And then the last one I wanted to mention is really the Pennsylvania Infrastructure Bank. It is a great tool. I think it's underutilized. It's providing low interest loans to municipalities for infrastructure projects. So if you've got something that you really need to get done today, you might need to use some future funds to pay for it. You're not getting what you need in terms of doing the project. So you may need to look at this type of a thing with an infrastructure loan bank. It's, and the rates are very, very low on this thing. And then this is my final slide. It's just a reminder that our 2023 TIP public comment period is underway. Keep in mind, we look at these comments when it comes to the next TIP update. We'll be looking at any comments that come in when we start to kick off the next TIP for 2025 TIP. All the information is available on our website. That's SPC or www.spcregion.org. And now I'm going to turn it over to Dina Salemi, and she works in the design unit at PennDOT District 11. We work closely with her on some of our smaller project delivery, but she's an expert on providing an overview here for you on project administration and delivery.
Hey, Ryan.
Yes.
I just want to throw a reminder out there to everybody. If you have any questions as we go through this, please don't be shy about hitting that chat button in the bottom right-hand corner. And I don't see anything in the chat right now, but if you have a question, please throw it in the chat and we will get to those questions at the very end.
Oh, and I did promise John Quatman I'd throw it back to him. So before I turn it over to Dina, I asked John if I covered that in a manner that was fine, and if you had anything that you thought I admitted, John, that you need to chime in with, go ahead.
Ryan, I thought you did a good job covering the material, a good breakdown of the TIP update process and the candidate projects. There really isn't nothing I could add at this time. I mean, we can get deeper into the weeds, but probably not right now. But
Right.
I thought you did cover it well.
Okay. All right. Thanks, John. I mean,
Yep.
it's a team effort when it comes to it. I didn't want to make it seem like it was just our end of things. The District 11's planning and program couldn't do it without them. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Dina and bring us home here for the last few slides.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about project administration and delivery. So once a local transportation project is funded and programmed on the TIP, what are the next steps? So that's what we're going to talk about. So PennDOT projects, including local projects, are managed using the Engineering and Construction Management System. So this is also known as ECMS. So if you want to do business with PennDOT, you have to register as an ECMS business partner, and you also have to acquire a SAP vendor number. So in order to receive payments from the Commonwealth or receive state or federal funds, you have to have this staff number for payments to be processed. So the links are provided there along with phone numbers in case you need assistance. So let's talk a little bit about ECMS. So ECMS is the communication portal between PennDOT and our business partners. We manage our projects from design through construction in ECMS. So we do a lot of things in there. Consultants can submit statements of interest, technical proposals. We execute engineering agreements. We process invoices. We advertise construction projects. Contractors can submit electronic bids. And then we manage those construction contracts from through closeout. And the ECMS is available 24/7, and there is a help desk. So this is the ECMS homepage. You'll see in the red circle, register as a business partner. So if you click that link there, you'll get step-by-step instructions on how to become a business partner. So if you're a local sponsor and you're going to utilize state or federal funds, you have to enter into a reimbursement agreement with PennDOT. So that is done through our reimbursement agreement system, also known as RAS. So once you become a business partner, you get ECMS administrative roles established. And then from there, you can add reimbursement agreement roles also. And specifically, the signatory role is the person that can execute that agreement in RAS. So this is the RAS homepage. Reimbursement agreements are going to have the project-specific details, the reimbursement requirements, and then the funding information. So just note, agreements can take 3 to 4 months to go through the process. They have to be fully executed prior to any work beginning, or you may not get compensated for that or reimbursed. And it is a reimbursement program, not a grant program.
Bill, yeah, I guess I'm being optimistic.
Hey, folks, someone's not muted on the line here. Can you all check your mute buttons? Sorry, Dina, go ahead.
You're good, thanks. So an engineering or third-party agreement is an agreement between a consultant and a local project sponsor who's receiving funds through a project or a PennDOT project reimbursement agreement. So that agreement is going to document the consultant and the local project sponsor's responsibility in project development. So the agreement can be for preliminary engineering, final design, services during construction, construction inspection or management, and I think I left off bridge inspection. And those agreements are set up in ECMS. So the local project sponsor has to decide how they want to administer the project. Do you want to use your municipal engineer, or do you want to go through the consultant selection process? So if you're going to select a consultant, there are procedures that you need to follow. So if you have a large project where the design contract is going to be over 150,000, that's large project procedures. If it's less than 150,000, that would be small project. Or again, you can utilize your municipal engineer. But before we talk about consultant selection, let's talk about Pub 93. So this is the policies and procedures for the administration of consultant agreements. So this is the policy and guidance that you need to procure and administer consultant agreements. So everything you need to know about preparing consultant agreements, selecting consultants, administering those agreements, and managing consultants is going to be in this manual. So for large project procedures, the project must be advertised at ECMS according to that publication 93 that I just mentioned. Statements of interest are coming from consultant business partners through an advertisement ECMS. The final rank consultant submits a tech and a price in order to execute an engineering agreement. And you want to make sure you're selecting a qualified consultant who's familiar with the PennDOT project delivery process. And this is a qualification-based selection, which means that you're selecting the consultant based solely on qualifications. So there's no cost factored into the selection. If you want to utilize your designated municipal engineer, again, you have to select that engineer through an approved qualification-based selection in accordance with Pub 93. And the important thing is the advertisement has to specify all those engineering services that you may want that firm to perform down the road. Statements of interest have to have the professional qualifications, experience, and technical competence. And the final selection is approved by PennDOT Central Office. A municipal engineer is only good for 5 years, so every 5 years you have to go through this process. Once the municipal engineer is approved, then you can create a sole source agreement in ECMS for whatever design work you need. So once your reimbursement agreement is executed, your engineering agreement is executed, you've issued notice to proceed for a consultant to begin, you can begin the design process. Ryan had mentioned PennDOT Connects is required. Excuse me. Is required on every project, and it's early coordination and collaboration with PennDOT, local governments, planning organizations, and stakeholders to get community input and identify opportunities to address safety issues, bicycle ped accommodations, transit, multimodal considerations, etc. So there is a link at the end of the presentation that will take you to the PennDOT Connects website, where there is some online training, newsletter, and other information. So the project scope, cost estimate, and schedule. So these are 3 important aspects of every project. And it's critical at the beginning of the project that you have a well-defined scope of work. So at the engineering and environmental scoping field view that takes place at the beginning of the project, you're going to meet with all the partners, all the players, the PennDOT disciplines, the Federal Highway Administration, and the local sponsor. Everyone gets together and discusses the proposed scope of work and make sure that everyone is in agreement. The project cost estimate, it needs to be prepared by a qualified consultant familiar with PennDOT projects, and an accurate project costs are critical for planning and programming funds for the different design phases. And along with that, there's a realistic project schedule for the design process so that those funds are programmed in the correct years. Again, you want a consultant with experience on PennDOT project delivery. Every project is unique. So this project development flow chart, this just gives the approximate duration that it's going to take to get through this process, from planning and program to project startup, through design to construction. So every project is unique, as I said. Every project is going to bring different challenges. There's going to be, depending on the state and/or federal funding, there's going to be different guidelines that you're going to follow. So again, different challenges right away, utilities, possibly environmental issues. So the durations are going to vary based on all of that and the complexity of the project. So before you can advance from preliminary engineering to final design, you have to have your environmental clearance. Your environmental document has to be approved. Before you can advance to construction, you need to have your right-of-way clearance, your utility clearance, and your railroad certification so that the federal funds can be obligated for construction. So every project, every local project is assigned a district project manager. So that person is available to provide guidance and oversight and make sure that you're adhering to state and federal guidelines. So this is publication 740. It's the local project delivery manual. So there's a lot of information in this manual and describes the policies and procedures, everything you need to know from procurement to design, to getting your project through construction. So this is a really important manual that you need to be familiar with. So to summarize, if you want to do business with PennDOT and receive state and federal funds, you have to have ECMS access, you have to be a business partner, you need to have that SAP vendor ID so payments can be processed. You need a reimbursement agreement through the RAS system. I had mentioned Pubs 93 and 740. And following those publications is important in order to receive federal and state funds. It's going to depend on compliance with those laws and regulations. The sponsor is responsible for procuring engineering services with a qualified consultant and then managing that consultant through the design process all the way through construction. So again, a consultant with PennDOT experience is critical. It's very important to project delivery. District 11 staff can provide assistance and guidance as needed. I think my contact information is on the next slide, along with Zach Hamnikar, who's our contract and consultant agreement engineer. So if you have any questions, we can provide guidance. So feel free to reach out. Thank you.
And this is Ryan again. This is a, and this will be in the PowerPoint that we provide, or the slides that we provide, and you'll have these links, so you don't need to scribble this down or anything. But these are all the different guidances that were talked about throughout the presentation by any of the speakers. And that, like I said, you'll be able to check those out when we provide the slides to all the registered participants. Is there anything, Dom, or from
Yeah,
the
so-
other speakers that want to?
Yeah, let's, I think this is Cheryl. I think we threw a ton of information at everybody.
Yep.
I just would like to, open it up to see if anybody, has any questions or anything they'd like to share with the group, or hey, anybody? I'm assuming that the WebEx is open, that people can just ask questions. Dom?
Yeah, the ability to
It is.
unmute. You can unmute and just talk at this point.
Yep. Yep. I don't see anything in the chat box, so as Cheryl said, I know that was a lot of information in the hour. But if you have any questions, just unmute yourself, and we have folks here that can answer the questions.
That's a great question, Levi. I don't know if everybody saw it. Levi asked if there's any funding sources for bridges under 20 feet in length. That's a very tough situation. I mean, Dom, I don't want to speak for SPC, but I don't believe any federal funds are eligible under 20 feet in length, correct?
I'm
Correct.
pretty sure about that, yeah.
So, yeah, and the state doesn't have any additional funds, other, like if it's for like a multimodal type need, pedestrian need, trail need, but I think mostly those bridges that are less than 20 feet are usually replaced or repaired by liquid fuels funds, if I'm not mistaken. If anybody knows differently.
Cheryl,
please.
may I add something to
Yeah.
that?
Please.
There are exceptions. There are a few bridges out there that have a functional classification of 17 or better, which in that case would qualify for federal funds. And the bridge length is less than 20 feet long. We don't see it often, but we do come across them from time to time where we could pursue federal funds. We could use STP funds, STU funds for those types of projects.
Can you let them know what that means? 17 functional, whatever.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, a bridge is designated a certain functional classification based on how it functions in our system, in our road and bridge system. It's based on volume, based on ADT, average daily traffic, and of course our interstates are the highest level. Then it goes down from NHS all the way down to local road. A functional classifications assign a certain number to the designated road, and these roads we're talking about here with functional class 17, that would be something like an average type road, like a minor arterial, or something like a principal arterial, which would be a 14. We do have sources of information, like a cheat sheet, so to speak, that we could share with the folks here if they'd be interested in and seeing what those functional classifications are and what they mean. So yeah, I would say a 17, a 16, there are certain numbers that do qualify for federal funds, and with the bridge length being less than 20 feet. If anyone wants additional information about that, I could certainly, share some information about that. Just reach out to me. John Quatman, the Transportation Planning Manager, sorry.
All right, thanks, John. Are there any other questions? Anybody? Last call here. Well, not hearing any. Cheryl, I think we would just like to thank on behalf of SBC. We'd like to thank everyone for participating today. I hope the workshop has been informative. If you have any follow-up questions, please don't hesitate to contact us. We're gonna reach out and provide this presentation as we said before. So if anyone who registered for this will receive the presentation and receive a follow-up email. But if you have questions that you are not thinking about now that you have later, just please reach out to us and ask. Cheryl, do you have any closing remarks?
No, I just wanted to thank everybody. I think they know where to find us. And, Barry DeAngelis is in charge of our municipal services department. And he's always extremely, those of you that work with him and Tony and Tim Tegmeyer all know that they're extremely helpful and would get any questions to anybody here if so needed. So thank you all for your attention.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.